here with the fantastic, multi-talented, just all around great guy, friend of the filmmaker and producer and director, and just anything you could hope for all in one, Mr. Bruce Nahin. Thank you for being here with us today. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I would like to get into that lovely shirt that you're wearing. I see it on Instagram all the time. You have great variations of it. Would you like to speak about it, about the organization
Yeah, I
behind?
would. It's an organization started by a screenwriter named Maya Baker, M-Y-A Baker. Her goal was to have everyone in the industry wearing it. It says, shoot films, not people. She has things like hoodies and sweatshirts and all sorts of tie-dye shirts, but all with this language on it. If someone's interested, they can go to shootfilmsnotpeople.store. And we're trying to get the word out. It's a movement, basically.
Fabulous. Yeah, and what a great movement it is. I mean, who could disagree with that?
Exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful. And how did you meet Miss Meyer Baker?
I was at a Juneteenth celebration they have in South Central in the Mert Park, like I go to every year. And she had a stand.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Instant connection, and here we are. You have this great momentum built up. I see it's very popular on Instagram.
It
Yeah.
is there. She republishes a lot of people who are wearing it.
Fantastic. That's basically, I'm glad that we touched on that because that's basically the theme of this festival, I believe. Like when I first started it, it's really to spotlight women in the cinematic world, directors and screenwriters and producers, because they don't always get the light that they deserve shown on them. But really, as I'm going through this journey, it's really about unity, right? Because we could elevate people, but then if we don't collaborate properly with integrity and with a sense of equality, then it's really, kind of not the complete picture. And it seems like this has been a cornerstone for you with this movement and in your work. So if you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of shootings all over the country, and we just think that if there's more awareness to it, and who better than producers and crew to get the word out, because we tend to have the ear of the media more so than a guy working at a factory or a clothing store or an insurance company or a law firm or wherever they are, a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to create the visibility through our visibility.
Fantastic. Really, really fantastic. Kudos to you both. I'd also love, it's been a year since we've spoken, so I know that you've had a lot of projects in the works. Would you like to speak about what you have going on a bit?
Yeah, we just finished a movie called Born Again, which is a Mexican American comedy. I was approached by Paul Rodriguez and his representatives to produce a script that he wrote. It was basically to have a celebration of Mexican American comedy. They had 14 or 15 day players who were all famous who came in for the day. We, of course, had Paul. We had Tony Ponto, whose biggest fame was Ugly Betty. We had Danny Trejo, Gary Busey. We had Emilio Rivera, who most people know from Mayans or from
Okay.
Sons of Anarchy. And
Great.
they didn't know, I didn't know anyway, that he does stand-up comedy on weekends.
Oh,
So
neat.
so we finished that movie, and I was hired, and I'm Jewish, so it's a little strange, but I was hired for those in Chicago. I was hired to create the definitive biopic for D.L. Moody, the Moody Bible Institute. And we're in the third script revision and casting now, and should go to camera by June. And following that, I have a gay-themed musical. I've never produced a musical before, set in Napa.
Wow.
See, I do a lot of production attorney work, and I do about 15 acting gigs a year where I kind of play Sam Elliot for those who can't afford Sam Elliot. I can be the
Brilliant.
mean ass curmudgeon, kind of Larry David meets Sam Elliot if they had a child. That's the character I sell. So I've done that, and I've got one coming up in about 2 weeks. And through production council, there's always more opportunities. I don't know what else is in the works, but a lot of talk right now.
Right. So you're a producer for hire. People basically come to you when they have funding, when they have a script and director in place.
Not a director necessarily. They may ask
Okay.
me to get the director, but they'll have the script. It's basically a screenwriter, director are my clientele.
Okay.
And they'll come to me saying, we want to make this movie, but don't know the technicalities of making a movie. We want creative control, but we want someone to make our movie. So I'll hire the line producer. The line producer will hire the crew. We'll do the castings and all that for them. It's almost like a production service agreement, but I work for the production company. I'm not separate.
I see. I see. Yeah, and you have the legal background, so people feel safe with you. They can avoid any pitfalls of, anything potentially getting sued because of a logo or,
Yeah,
anything like that.
it's interesting you should mention logos because I know it has nothing to do with our project today, but it's a misnomer. People seem to think that you may not utilize logos, and that's simply not true. You can, as long as you utilize the logos in the purposes intended. Basically, yes, you can use an Apple computer, you can drink a Budweiser, you can eat Cheetos. You don't have to get rid of any of that. Most of that's perfectly legal as long as you're not diluting the trademark or defaming the trademark. And that's things that lawyers have to deal with. I'll give you two examples that happened to me. I was hired to look at a clip. There was a TV show called Aquarius with David Duchovny.
I love that show.
Where he played a cop. His best friend was Charles Manson. In one scene, David Duchovny picked up a Budweiser to drink it, and that was perfectly fine. But then Charles Manson picked up a Budweiser to drink it, and that was a no-go because Budweiser wouldn't want to be the drink of Charles Manson.
Wow.
And then there was a clip I reviewed in one of the 50 Shades of Grey where Mr. and Mrs. Grey were laying on a bed eating Cheetos, which is perfectly fine until Mr. Grey got the idea of making it a marital aid. And then he proceeded to eat the marital aid. And I'm trying to make this a family show.
Yeah. Understood.
And I said, no, aside for the fact that you're using it as a marital aid, you're still eating it, but I don't know that Cheetos wants to advertise in that vein. So maybe you ought to cut that clip out.
Right.
But if Mr. and Mrs. Grey were simply eating Cheetos, it would have been just fine. In fact, companies pay for product placement. So when you get free product placement, they're not going to object. As long as you use it appropriately. It's an urban legend taught in some film schools that you have to blur all these logos. That's kind of a waste of money and silly, and it's not true.
Wow.
So anyway, that if you got any young producers listening someday to this thing, they know the truth. That's an urban myth.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful.
But I will check. Let's supposing they had someone with your name and that somebody is in New York and she's a prostitute on 42nd Street in the script. I would probably object to that. However, if somebody with your name is in Sioux City, Iowa, and she's a prostitute, in front of the tractor convention or something. I mean, I'm making it up.
Yeah.
Then that would be okay.
Gotcha.
In fact, there's a TV show now about my Chippendales.
Yeah.
And it's a fiction story. It's inspired by, so nobody think it's the truth. They bend the timelines like. But as an homage to me, they had a studly, buffed man with long black hair sleep with the costume designer. So I called our costume designer and asked her if it was as good for her as it appeared to be for me. Because she's played by Juliette Lewis, but they're using a different name. So she and I had a bit of a giggle about that little liaison that we had on TV that never happened.
Wow. Yeah, no, because I was watching it and I was waiting for some reference to you, or I was like, oh, I wonder who's gonna play Bruce, you know.
Yeah, and that's not gonna happen. No one's gonna play me, regrettably.
Yeah. No, I was, because it's, like I often wonder, like if I write something and if I just like mention a band, like I believe it's called right of publicity, right?
Well, that right, really, that's another urban legend. I know we're getting into business affairs this year, but I don't mind if you don't mind.
Yeah.
There was a TV limited series produced by Ryan Murphy on FX Network called Feud. It was the story of Betty Davis and Joan Fontaine. And Joan Fontaine's sister is Olivia de Havilland. They're both phony names. I forget their real names. But de Havilland didn't like the fact that she was mentioned in this film, because they had made up scenes between her and her sister and whatnot. And the case went to the California Court of Appeals, which is generally not dispositive nationwide. It's a California court. But that California court basically said the right of publicity is secondary to the First Amendment. So as long as they don't defame you intentionally, they can say whatever they want. And what happened was Ms. de Havilland appealed that Court of Appeals hearing to the California Supreme Court, which said, we like that opinion, so we're adopting it for California. And then Ms. de Havilland wasn't satisfied with disrupting the whole economy there. She appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, where in a 2-sentence thing we said affirmed, which means they've adopted this Santa Barbara Court of Appeals for the whole nation.
Wow.
So it's the only time I know that a California Court of Appeals case is now the authority for the whole United States.
Wow. So
thank you, Ms. de Havilland, for all your appeals.
Goes to show the more you resist, the more something persists, right?
Right. So the right of publicity really doesn't exist. Your life rights are really your point of view. Let's suppose in Kamael and Robert Siegel, who did that TV show, wanted to tell my story, and my story was in the newspapers. And in fact, we released last year through Discovery, The Curse of Chippendales, a 4-part documentary that you, Katerina, and your listeners can get on Discovery. I'm told it'll be on Max in January because they're doing screwy things with Max now that Discovery bought Max.
Oh.
So they're going to have a lot of Discovery stuff on Max. And that was the largest viewed documentary on Discovery last year. So So it'll be there.
Neat.
But let's supposing Robert Siegel and Kamael and the people on Welcome to Chippendales watch that. That's now public record. So they could take all that information and write a story without my consent. But what they didn't have is the ability to express my opinions. So some of the opinions I expressed in the documentary they couldn't use, but they can use the facts that they could have elicited from the documentary. They couldn't use my direct quotations because that's my point of view. That they have to
Right.
pay for. That's what I own. That's what Discovery paid me for. So they can't
Wow.
just lift that. That's copyright infringement. And as a result, Lightbox Entertainment, my co-producers on the Chippendales docs, would say, "You've infringed on our copyright. You're taking lines from our story." But if they wanted to call me and buy my point of view, I could tell them the same thing I told Discovery. But
Wow.
they didn't because they didn't care. They bent the timelines. They changed all the facts, and they've got a nice story, but it's just a story.
Right. Right. But it's really again why it's so important to have somebody like you on set, right? And beyond.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I've also heard of people paying for rights when they didn't have to, or you
Yeah, well,
know,
that would be, for instance, if you bought the rights to have the Apple computer logo on your thing, you didn't have to buy that right. That's what I was talking about earlier.
right, right. Yeah,
I
yeah,
did,
with
I did, I did a case. I know this is becoming a business affairs lecture, but I, I did a thing about a year ago. A guy named Caleb, who was the lead guitarist for Elton John and Hall and Oates, which is Elton John's band as well. And in the documentary, they had several scenes of Elton John playing music and singing his songs as Caleb was standing next to him playing the lead guitar. So my people wanted me to contact Elton John's people and let them know. So because Caleb was my client, I called Elton John. He gave me Elton's phone number.
Oh, nice.
So I
Yeah.
called Elton on the phone. He says, "You'll have to talk to my husband." I forget the guy's name. He's in charge of all that shit. And the husband said, basically, "No way. You're not going to do anything where Elton's singing." I said, "Well, why don't you call your lawyer and tell him that we're doing a documentary on Caleb and we're going to use some of Elton's music when Caleb's in the scene and see what they say." And this man was hostile and yelling and screaming in a very British. And he called me back 2 days later. He said, "I just talked to my lawyers. I guess you're good to go." Because
Wow.
we were not doing a documentary on Elton John. We were doing a documentary on Caleb, and those snippets proved the point of the documentary, that he was the lead guitarist for Elton John. We did not have a scene where it was just Elton John or an Elton John concert, but we used that scene of Caleb to prove that Caleb actually was there.
Wow.
And when husband called attorney said, "Yeah, that's what we call fair use." So he called back all apologetic with the tail between his legs. And that was the only time I've ever talked to Elton John in my life. But for that few 4 or 5 minute call we had before he gave it to his husband.
That's pretty neat though. I mean, it just shows that you really have to know, and if the law's on your side, it's on your side. And it
Well, I can give you an example of where we had to get permission.
oh,
This
fantastic.
this goes back a long time ago. I do a lot of mentoring of young directors doing student theses. I mentored Ryan Coogler a decade or so ago. But this young man, I'll tell you his name at the end, was doing a student film for a Christian film school. And that film was only going to be exhibited at the school at their festival. It was never going to get released anywhere, this film. So we wanted to use a particular song in the opening of it. And I told the kid he couldn't do it. That'd be impossible, cost him a fortune. He says, we'll try. So I called the publisher on the phone. The publisher says, well, we can't give you those rights, but you can call this number. And he gave a number, a British phone number. So my client, my student, and I called this number. And I know this is a family show, so edit out the parts that you don't want to edit out. But the man answers the phone and says, who the fuck is this? I'm banging this beautiful broad, and you're interrupting as we drift down the Thames. It was like 4 a.m. And the young man says, well, I need to use so-and-so's song. It's only going to be in this little Christian movie. And I promise no one will see it. The guy says, off and hangs up. The next day, we get a call from the publisher. Apparently, Robert Plant had sent a fax to his publisher saying, give the son of a bitch whatever he wants. I hope he dies. So that's how we did Stairway to Heaven, student pieces of Scott Derrickson, who's gone on to do Doctor Strange and Robin Hood, and some others at the opening of this Christian film festival. So it never hurts to ask people.
You've gotten yelled at by a lot of British people.
I know this is going to get edited. I once had a British girlfriend. And I always loved when we got in a fight because when British women say the word bastard, it comes out, you bastard, you. And I always found that to be arousing. So
it's just such a coincidence. I have this London coffee cup.
Well, the people don't know it, but you and I were interrupted by Harry and Meghan in the first go-run of this tape. So what can I tell you?
I think the spirit of the Queen is watching over this interview, and
it must be, because we got cut off because Harry and Meghan showed up. Yeah. Who knows how that one happened? And these people, you'll probably edit it out because they don't know what the hell we're talking about. But
I'll have to put some reference into. Yeah, we'll just say we were doing the interview beforehand, and we were having all these issues, technical issues, and Bruce was able to hear my voice, but Harry and Meghan appeared on his screen. I believe because you were watching it on Netflix before the doc. And there's just the spirit of Britain, the spirit of England.
Well, most Americans are monarchists anyway. We all like to hear about the royal family.
And depending on who you ask, this whole we have our own government is just a farce, right? And we're still
well, Harry says that the 4th of July, now that he lives in America, is bittersweet for him. He celebrates with his wife and children, but he does understand the historical context. When his great-great-grandfather, like 20 times removed, got his butt kicked.
Wow.
Anyway, back to your interview.
Yes. We'll steal it back from London. Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. I could talk to you for hours because you have such great stories.
Well, let me let you people know if they want to stay in contact. My Instagram is at Bruce Nahin, Nahin. And you can see who I'm promoting, what I'm doing. I generally promote young producers, directors, and actors and post about them. Last night was all about music, so we've been posting about a music thing last night.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. So because I remember last time we spoke, you were also involved in Death Row Records.
Yeah, I was involved in Death Row Records in its primal days.
Wow.
Its early days.
Wow. And I love that you act as well. What have been some of your favorite acting
Oh,
roles?
I play same character all the time. I play Sam Elliot.
Okay.
You know, I'm just a cheap Sam Elliot.
But I just think that's so interesting. It also speaks to, like, a lot of actors feel like when they start out, oh, I could play anything. So I think what you're saying really speaks to knowing, you know, who you can portray and how the world perceives you. Um,
Well, it's true of me, but you know, George Clooney or somebody gets around, but Sam Elliott is a particular type,
mhm.
and I know Sam, and he's a really sweet, nice guy, but he has a personality that people want in their films, but can't afford Sam. I did a documentary with Sam where he was the narrator of uh, of something called Honor Guard. It dealt with the young people who are the Honor Guard at Arlington. You know,
Oh, wow.
the guys who shoot the guns and move the coffins by carriage and stuff like that, wagon. And he narrated it, and he did a fantastic job.
Oh, excellent. Wow.
So I've had limited contact with him when we were getting up to that point, but yeah, I'll, maybe 8 to 15 times a year I'll play Sam Elliott.
That's
That's
so
who I'm
cool.
playing.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, thank you. I want to thank you so much for your time and all that you do. So multifaceted and talented, and always looking out for filmmakers, and just really bringing out that community and unity to all that you do. I
Well,
I
it's my
much
pleasure. And, you know, go to @BruceNahin on Instagram and see what's going on. You'll see a lot of young, up and coming directors and young kids on TV shows and stuff like that. That's Hollywood. That's the world I'm in. Kids are always in TV shows bragging about their part.
Right, right. Yes, and it's important to, if we imagine, if we all helped each other and promoted each other the way you do, it'd be a happier place.
All right. Well,
So,
I'm glad we
yes.
got this done, girlie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for being a part of the festival again. Thank you.
Always. Bye bye.
Thank thank you. Bye.